Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's All In. So, today we're going to talk about who you're getting advice from. We all know that everybody has an opinion about something at some point, at some time. And when we sometimes ask for some of that advice, you have to be able to discern if the advice is coming from somebody who should be giving you advice. And I will tell you, it's not always easy to discern that. But what I will tell you is be very careful. I'm going to give you an example. As an entrepreneur, one of the things that happens is people will talk about social media. So whether it's this platform or any platform, right? They would tell you you've got to be on. I will never forget a few weeks ago. Uh, I was on two different calls within, it couldn't have been 24 hours. And I had one person who literally said to the group, you need to be on every single platform because you need to make sure that you're out there and you don't know where your audience is, and just went on and on and on. And everybody said, wow, every platform? Yes, every platform. And then within 24 hours, I was on another call and somebody said, pick one, do really well on that one platform, and then determine if you need to be on the other. Both had really great, in my opinion, I guess, advice around the reasoning. But what I remember feeling is, how can the advice be so different, so different? And then what do you do? And so sometimes when we think about what people are, where they're coming from, it can be hard. And you have to really figure out what makes sense for you. And you also have to be very aware of when somebody is giving you advice on whatever it is, on whatever it is. Is it coming from a place of knowledge? Like, do they really know and understand? Or is it coming from a place of they're just kind of, guessing and just kind of thinking based on what they know and what they've heard, or just kind of what they think they want to provide you? At the end of the day, the advice is just that. It's just advice. But it's up to you to determine whether you're going to take it or not. But more importantly, what are you going to do with it? And I think so often it can be very frustrating. And I'm talking to my entrepreneurs here in particular. It really can be frustrating because we make decisions. We make real decisions off of this that could impact your business. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, just think about advice that you've been given from people and what that can look like. And so today, it's just, again, let's just be very careful about the advice that we receive from people and how you use it. All right. So, Cassandra, what you got about it?
What you got about it? I always tell people, and I'm gonna kind of go back into my performer, voice coach, acting coach life, just a little bit on this one because a lot of times, I would have people that would go and do a show and they would get feedback from friends or family or different people, which is wonderful. But I would always say, make sure that if you're getting advice about what you do as a performer, if you're getting advice about, how to be better on stage, really think about who you want that constructive feedback from, because
Mhm.
it's going to make or break, one, how you feel about yourself, but then also how you show up the next time. And I think there's been so many times where I've had people come to me and say, "Well, my sister said this and said I should do this and this and this." And I'm like, "Well, I don't agree with your sister." You know, and I'm like, as the expert in this area, I'm telling you to, just take that with a grain of salt and focus your energy on, what is your goal? What is your dream? Make sure that the advice and the feedback that you're getting is from a legitimate source. And that's what I say, a legitimate source who really understands what it is that you're trying to do, has been there, has experienced it on some level, and knows the road.
Yep.
And I think that that's a really important thing in entrepreneurship, in speaking, in anything that you're doing, to look at it and go, who am I listening to? Who's in my head? Who are the people that are in my head that might not necessarily be helping me, well intentioned, but they might not be helping me in the way that I need.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where it's that word, right? It's intention, right? People are well intentioned. In most cases, they really are. But even with well intentioned advice, it still doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right advice for you. And I think sometimes it's hard to discern it. But I will also say, listen to your gut. Listen to your gut. Because sometimes when you hear something, you can say, that either rubs me the wrong way or it just doesn't feel right, or it immediately makes you start realizing, okay, this might not be the right person to answer this, to be giving me advice. And one of the things I've said is it doesn't make this person a bad person. It's just, a lot of times I'll say this, that's not their lane, right? That's not their lane. And you do going back to what you just said, right? It's understanding, the expert. It's making sure, and even when you might have multiple experts, but again, go back to what makes sense for you. And I think that's the other piece of just when we think about advice and listening to people. Everybody's going to always have some kind of opinion about something, but it still has to make sense for you and the season you're in and what you're doing. But it's asking some of those questions of, has this person done this? What is their experience with it? Because it just might not have it, and it's just an opinion. So I want us to make sure that when we are thinking about who we're listening to and who's giving us advice, just be very careful. And especially don't make what I call um, decisions based off that advice immediately. Take a moment and really think it through. I know sometimes you want to make, decisions very quickly, but give yourself some time to process what you hear, because that time might actually be what you need to recognize, okay, that advice doesn't work for me, not in this situation. So please make sure you're processing things in the time that you need.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Paul, and I know we were just talking about this on our pre-call, that I actually had reached out to somebody, with just a perspective. I was looking for perspective on a particular situation, on a pricing thing, for a gig and for a speaking gig. And when I got the email back from them, it just, to her point about following your gut, it just didn't feel right to me. I read it, I was like, I don't think this is valid. And and that's also part of, like, Paul and I talk a lot about self-trust and just like building confidence in your own voice and like knowing. And I
Yes,
and knowing that when you have that moment where you're like, this doesn't feel right, and that's different than,
yes,
sort of pushing your comfort zone. We're talking about, something that just like doesn't align. Maybe it doesn't feel like it's the right information, or maybe
right,
it's the source doesn't
right,
have the experience, to Paul's point, that
yes,
would be able to give you an accurate perspective. So
yes,
sometimes you just have to be careful about who you're asking, if
yep,
you are asking for a perspective or advice or something on a particular thing. Um,
yep,
and I always say, the best place to go for that is the person that's doing the thing you want to be doing.
yes,
If they're
yes,
doing it at a level that you want to be doing it, that might be the person to call, because
correct.
they've obviously done something and they know their stuff more, and they might have more insight as well because of their own journey. So I think it's
Yep,
important to really look at that. Yeah, that's all I got.
yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, let's just end it with this. I think so much of when we think about people who give advice is follow your gut. And so I want everybody this week to really start thinking about that as you hear things from people, right? Is when your gut kind of says, that doesn't quite, sit right. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to say, let me pause on that. Let me ask the person who's actually doing whatever it is that I'm trying to do, or get some other perspective. But take the time to do that, you all. I think we do ourselves a disservice when we take in all this information. And I'm not saying it's bad information, but what I am saying is sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. And sometimes, given where you are, it's certainly not the information that you need to be taking in. So let's make sure that you are thinking through the advice that you're getting and the perspectives that you're hearing, and just make sure you're discerning for yourself. And if it doesn't feel right, it's okay. Let's go ask somebody else, because the right answer, the right decision, may be just one conversation away. And for that, that's what we want to do. So go out there and let's make some decisions that make sense Doesn't mean we're saying no to everybody. What we are saying is we're going to say yes to ourselves and making sure that we make the right decisions based on the right advice. All right?
All right.
Got it? Bye,
All
everybody.
in. Have a great day, everyone. Whoops, wait. Sorry, I made a mistake on the stop, everybody. Bye again.